guys win again, okay? Men win again. Hey, we control your bodies. There will never be a female president ever. It's over. Glass ceiling? Dude, it's a ceiling made of bricks. You will never break it. Your stupid face keeps hitting the brick ceiling. We will keep you down forever. You will never control your own bodies.
That is how at least some male Trump supporters are celebrating his win by continuing the degrading and threatening behavior that was a hallmark of the Trump campaign. The question is, what about the women who voted for Donald Trump? Joining me now are Maya Wiley, the president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and Shannon Watts, founder and organizer of White Women Answer the Call. Maya and Shannon, thank you guys both for being here. A few moments ago, we were talking about the numbers here of white women who voted for Donald Trump. And the reality is that more women voted for, first of all, white women voted for Donald Trump in similar numbers to previous election cycles before even the most threatening and misogynist and violently sexist behavior and rhetoric came out of his mouth, though there was plenty in 2016 and 2020. But also women overall voted in greater numbers for Hillary Clinton than Kamala Harris. Do you have a theory on why that might be?
Well, first, let's just say this. You know, women are not a monolith.
Yeah.
Black women came out in droves for Kamala Harris, came out in droves for Hillary Clinton, although there were some places in which Black voters did not come out to vote enough in the first place. Those are different issues. And by the way, when all the focus was on Black men and what are Black men going to do, and the rest of us were sitting here going, well, Black men actually typically outvote white women for the candidate that has and shares more interests with women. And there is less of a gender gap between Black men and Black women than any other racial group. The only reason I'm saying that is because there was
a super important point.
It's a super important point because the reality of how complicated gender is in these races are that, you know, a lot of that misogyny for Black women was also about race.
Yeah.
Was also about understanding, you know, we're the ones, you know, remember that Halloween parade in Pennsylvania in the town where firefighters decided it was fine to have a grown man dressed as Donald Trump dragging a grown woman dressed as Kamala Harris in chains behind him. That was race and gender. I think the one thing that we have known, and it has been true for a very long time in our voting history, is that there are white women who vote their ideology, and that includes their gender, and there are white women who do not. The white women who do not are voting their race as opposed to their gender.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that in this election cycle as well. That means we should not put all women in a single category. It's a more complex story. But at the end of the day, to see any of these images or hear any of this language, and you didn't even play all of it.
Yes, we don't have enough time.
The one where Trump started saying the B word and then got the entire crowd right before the election to call the sitting vice president of the United States the B word, in addition to the C word.
Yeah.
In addition to whatever other slurs they have. But I don't think we can understand that separate and apart from whether we are voting our interests or not. And far too often, the relationship between patriarchy and gender, racism, come together, and we see these differences every time.
Well, and that explains why white women would be more marginally comfortable voting for Hillary Clinton than Kamala Harris. Shannon, I found Megyn Kelly's evolution on this galling, but also instructive, right? Here's a woman who was very much a target in 2016 of Donald Trump's attacks and rhetoric. And in 8 years, she finds herself on a stage in Pennsylvania in the closing days of the campaign, not only endorsing him, but endorsing the kind of masculinity that he and the MAGA movement represent. And white women followed her lead. Do you have a thesis on how and why that has happened?
Well, I mean, look, white women as a majority have voted for Republicans in all but 2 presidential elections in the last, 75 years or so. The hope was that they would have seen what happened in the Trump administration, that they would come to Kamala Harris's side and support her because of all of the promises she made to support women. Clearly, white women are part of the systemic patriarchy in this country, and they hope some of them hope, many of them hope that they will benefit from it, right? As Maya said, though, white women are not a monolith. We are divided by education and marital status and religion. The one silver lining, and there wasn't much, but the one silver lining was that one of the three groups that outperformed for Kamala Harris as opposed to Joe Biden were college-educated white women.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are not enough of them to swing an election, but I think this has to be a very real conversation that we have about how we change the hearts and minds of these non-college educated white women so that they will vote the right way in the future. The other thing I want to say is that it's really disheartening to hear people saying that this is somehow a reason, or the lesson from this election is that we can't have a woman at the top of the ticket. That in itself is misogyny and racism. And it's very unfair to Kamala Harris because her campaign was almost flawless. And it should prove actually the opposite. We need more women running, not fewer.
I want to just for a moment talk about this loss of allyship in a really desperate time, that not only were white non-college educated women voting for Trump and against Harris, they were also voting against the interests of their black and brown sisters in parts of the country where their lives are in danger. But whether because of, healthcare deserts, abortion deserts, or any number of other factors. And it's a phenomenon that happens increasingly as women get married. And I wonder, the plight of black and brown women in this country extends well past the fortunes of Kamala Harris. And you're quoted in a really important piece in the New York Times. And I'll read you your quote back, not that you need me to. Not only have black women always been on the menu, but they have been eating us, and it's been happening for generations. And what this represents for black women right now is it has deepened and been given significantly more permission. How should people of color, women of color, women, how should we think about this moment? And what lessons should be drawn from it, given how, I think, demoralizing it is in the cause of both equity and equality and just justice?
The thing about black women.
Yes, please, Maya.
And Shannon knows this well, too, and is an incredible ally. Black women show up all the time for what's right for people, for families, for communities. Black women showed up for women's suffrage when we knew we would still have to fight for our own if white women won that suffrage. We still showed up. It is a pattern of history, and we're going to keep showing up. But I think this is the point. We keep trying to model that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
That, if we gonna bleed out in a parking lot, you're gonna bleed out in a parking lot. If we can't take care of our children, you can't take care of your children. If we have to leave except we're more often in the category of worrying about whether our children are actually gonna survive. Worrying about if we're going to survive pregnancy. But no matter what our differences, at the end of the day, we are constantly working on coalition.
Yeah.
Constantly. And I think the issue here is, and Shannon said it so well, it's not whether or not women should be at the top of the ticket. It's whether or not we're ensuring that women are educated. And one of the things that's happening in the dialogue now is education is getting to have a bad word, like elitism. Well, there's nothing elitist about saying you shouldn't have to rely on your grandparents to take care of your children.
Yeah.
You should be able to retire and know you'll be okay. We should know that if the cost of sales taxes go up, it's going to harm all of us. And whether our kids are learning history is going to be good or bad, because it's going to be based on whether we're learning it or whether it's being barred from us. So at the end of the day, this is all about the same thing it's always been about. We have to find each other.
Yeah.
And women have to find each other. And it is women who are going to solve the problem, not going to be men.
It always is. Much respect to the men who are trying to solve the problem out there. Maya Wiley and Shannon Watts. Shannon, please come back. We have so many more questions for you. Thank you both for your time and thoughts in this moment of great big questions. Still to come this evening, Rudy Giuliani is the...
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.